right, here we are again for Q&A, but I've been thrown under the bus twice, and so I'm going to get it. First thing you did, talking about how I dress and such. Look, 38 years in Asia, I had to put on layers to stay warm in this country. So that's my excuse, all right?
You earned it. You deserve it. You look sharp in that bow tie.
Right, and Mac. Mac, I can't believe you threw me under the bus saying that I made you offer a critique. But, look, this is what it's like to deal with these guys, all right? All right. But all fun aside, you've got some serious questions to answer. So do you mind taking the last one?
Yeah.
And then we'll take some questions from the audience.
Good. Yeah, I think the gifting one, that's a key question. Great question. I appreciate just the spirit in which all those things were asked as well. I think that the gifting, that's why it's so important as we think about a church-wide discipleship, equipping every believer. I think it is truly important that we discern which things are expected of all believers and which things are things that are going to sort of come out in terms of gifting. So you rightfully use the example, I think, of evangelism as both an expectation for every single follower of Jesus, but also some are gifted in that way. I think actually that's an incredible metaphor for the teaching that we referred to in Colossians 3 is that there is an aspect that we should be admonishing and teaching one another. But yeah, there are those that are gifted. And so I think the question of discernment, I think, of those giftings is a process. And as we think about discipling, especially foundational discipleship, we have to make sure that we're majoring on the things that are expected of all people. And then in the process of doing those things, gifting, I think, is identified through demonstrated faithfulness over time. That's the beginnings of how we identify who might be gifted. Because people, especially new believers, they're not always self-aware. We are teaching about spiritual gifts. We are teaching about how the church is a body made up of many members. That's a part of the discipleship in our view of church. But I think even they would struggle with their own self-awareness of what my gifting is. The only way for them to do that is to be living and obeying the doctrine that they are being taught. And then through the assessment of the church planter, through other believers who might be a little further along in the process, they can help them to discern, hey, this might be the gifting that the Lord has given to you. And so that's why I think the foundation being laid, these are the expectations of all believers. As we walk in that and as we grow in it, it is definitely a process. I think the evaluation, the assessment that we didn't put up, I mentioned some of the elements of it. The assessment is not a one time you're assessed and then we determine all these different things about you. It is a process of growth for them, of ongoing development, ongoing insight, ongoing challenge into the life of that particular believer to help them find their place within that leadership spectrum. Good enough for questions
now? Thank you. I was listening, trying to compare or synthesize what I was hearing from Dr. Abner and then from you as well. Y'all both talked a lot about intentionality, being rooted in commitment to Scripture, having a church culture of discipleship, the elders being selected by the church, from the church, and even the methodology that you outlined. I heard a ton of similarities. So I guess my question is, was that the point, or are there differences in your approach to what Dr. Abner was sharing with us?
That's a great question for Dr. McKinley, who decided to frame this as a debate. Which rightfully so. I don't think that it's any secret to many of you in this room that there has been a lot of what appears to be debate, whether that's online or in the world of podcasts or whatever, and that there are kind of maybe two poles that we would swing between when it comes to missiology. I think Nathan was mentioning this a little bit, clarifying some of that, I think, for us, that is, if there are camps within our family, there are camps who would advocate, hey, as those who are sent out, we are primarily sent out to plant and then pastor the church. And then I think maybe the other extreme would be, or the other pole, so to speak, would be, hey, we're actually there to catalyze and multiply locals to carry on the work, dangers on either side, critique going back and forth. I think that's sort of the underlying idea of this conference. And the genius of Dr. McKinley was to get us up here and to be as clear as we could about what we're actually doing to show that those poles aren't actually as far apart as they may seem in public. And I think that is the benefit of us all being able to be here together, to see and to demonstrate, to meet one another, to hear from one another, and to recognize that there's actually not that much difference. I think what I appreciate about Chris's, and even he said it many times, Dr. Abner pointing out that the context determines so much. Living in a megacity, seeing the state of the church in the megacity, being open to the leadership of the church and the people of the church to say, hey, actually, you can deny all you want, but we want you to be an elder. I've been having that discussion in the church that we're part of in my megacity over and over again, being asked to be an elder, and so far I've told them no. They haven't taken a vote, so it hasn't been a democratic process yet, so we're still according to the BF&M. But I have, for the time being, said, no, that's not my calling or my gifting. And so I think so much of it, and this is actually to your first point, or first question maybe, Mac, I think that as you look at the core missionary task, how are they weighted? To what do we give priority? I think primarily as we look at the core missionary task, what we've seen is that it's a biblical process, it's a biblical sequence that tends to, over and over again, as we see the gospel going out in the power of the Spirit, it tends to follow this sequence of events. For us, going in as the outsiders, there's a lot of assessment on the front end of what is the state of the church, and based on the state of the church and the state of the gospel within our particular target or city or people group, that then determines, I think, the weight that we give to the particular piece or part of the core missionary task. Maybe where we would start, or where we would focus, or where we would commit ourselves to. And that actually is the value of the core missionary task in a lot of ways for us, as we're thinking through, how do I steward my time well with the calling that I've been given to go and to multiply the church among the unreached of the whole world. It gives us an evaluative structure. Man, do we need to do more entry and evangelism here? Do we need to focus more on discipleship here? Do we need to focus more on leadership development by actually being, for a time, an elder in this church to be able to train and raise people up? It gives us that framework biblically, I think, to help us justify and to figure out how we're going to steward our time well with the calling that we've been given.
Hey, good morning. On the entrust portion, in the world that we have today, this like always on, always connected world, how do you find that that's affecting the whole entrust thing? And we're not just kind of walking out of town and, hey, we'll send somebody back after a few months and send a few letters, right? So how do you find that influencing things really on both sides of that entrusting relationship? Yeah, that's a great point of clarification. I think it is important to point out, probably doesn't need to be pointed out, but exit in the New Testament wasn't a full and final break of the relationship. There were return visits, there were letters sent, there were emissaries sent, and so there was ongoing relationship in the midst of that. But a great question, I think, to address in today's world, our exit can be clouded by the fact that we can still be connected, even on the other side of the world. Yesterday I was having a call with some of our leaders that are still there in India, right? And so that reality of us being on the other side of the world or being removed, I do think that in the midst of ministry, this type of ministry, where you are pouring yourself out, discipling, spending your lives with people, that there is a natural break and an obstacle that comes with the removal of your physical presence. With you not being there, I just think there's an inevitability there that your absence is creating a greater sense of dependence on those people or on that church, on the Lord instead of you. And so I think even with all the connectivity that we have, the removal of your presence over time does, I think, still accomplish that, just like it did 2,000 years ago. I think that there are ways that we can actively continue to engage and encourage after having entrusted maybe a particular church, where if we've intentionalized this process, if we've been open about our aim to remove ourselves and for them to depend on the Lord and the Spirit and the Word instead of us, then we can actually be encouraging them even as we continue that conversation to say, hey, you know what? Maybe you have this decision in front of you. I don't need to be a part of that decision. You have this challenge that you're facing. I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to point you to some scripture, but I'm not in charge of taking care of that for you. And so I think even as we posture ourselves intentionally in a way that would say, you know what? I trust you to do this. I trust the Spirit working in you and your understanding of the Word to lead you in the right way. That's how I would handle that and address that.